come to these public hearings, there are obviously, just like with anything else anybody ever does, there are good ones and there are bad ones, and there are memorable ones and not so memorable ones. There are peaceful ones, there are cantankerous ones. First of all, before I give you what we heard tonight, I'd like to thank you because you have differences of opinion here. And you still made your points with a positive spin, rather than getting on each other, which has happened before. And I want to applaud you for that, giving us your concerns and doing it in a way that still, I think you've got in mind that tomorrow morning you're going to wake up and you're still all going to be neighbors, so good for you for that. What we heard tonight is that there's positives and negatives to wind power, and we've got to be mindful of both of them because one of our charges is what's best for the state of Vermont. We understand that, in fact, several of you have given us pointers with regard to the costs of wind power, aesthetics, noise, potential health concerns, pollution concerns. I mean, we have knowledge, and you mentioned to us tonight, of the fact that there's oil in those turbines that has to be changed on a regular basis, and that's a long way down from the tip of on the nose of the turbine itself. We've also understood that you have concerns with regard to the potential positives versus the negative impacts. For instance, several speakers indicated that there are just five turbines here, and you have to start looking at whether or not there's any gigantic advantage financially and energy-wise for the state of Vermont versus the costs that are there. On the other hand, we had several people who said, well, you know, Vermont has a green history, and renewable energy is something that we ought to be buying into, and that support the concept of wind power and the idea that we're doing something that will reduce our carbon footprint and presumably our dependence on foreign oil. Several speakers mentioned tourism on both sides, some saying that they didn't think it would have a major effect and in fact might draw interest, others saying that it's a blight and we should take a look at the economic impacts on tourism as well as we consider our decision in this case. There were points made that in fact, while in fact we have the decision here that the project might not be, or at the very least we should consider what the Milton and presumably Georgetown plans have to say with regard to its ridge lines, particular areas where this may be located, and concerns that the towns had as expressed in their town plans. There are concerns about the fact that we have an obligation as Public Service Board and as a state to remember that in fact we have the potential loss of both Vermont Yankee and Hydro-Quebec in the next few years. And how are we going to replace them? With what are we going to replace them? Is it going to be fossil fuel generation, or should we look at something else? NIMBY came up several times on both ways. We have an obligation in our backyards too as Vermonters, and others saying, you know, this isn't a NIMBY question for me. I don't think it should be in Vermont, not just in my backyard. Business came up, and the cost of energy, the renewable portfolio that the legislature has said we must have, and the cost that that's going to add, especially in light of the potential loss of other sources. One speaker said that, in fact, we would look at this much like we looked at the dams in this area 70 years ago. And 70 years in the future, we may look back at this and say this was the first step toward a different energy production system and the first step away from foreign oil. Less than half, 1%, a speaker mentioned too, of our state is actually suitable for the production, and therefore it's never going to be a major part of our overall production, unless we want to use the eastern shore of Lake Champlain, which also will produce. I think that when you speak to us, we try to listen, and as we go through this, we'll refine what we did here tonight, and attempt to try to make sure that those issues are addressed by the parties during the case. And if they're not, we have the ability to ask questions ourselves. I think the record will show you that we've done that in the past, frankly, with wind projects, as well as other projects that are proposed to us. I want to thank you again for your attendance tonight. I want to thank you for raising issues for us to consider and to explore. And in particular, I want to thank you, as I did in the beginning, for the fact that you did it humanely and with an understanding that you're all going to still be neighbors in the morning. Thank you very much.
And I also like to thank you, and this concludes our public hearing for tonight. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate the effort.